Welcome to His Excellency Abdullah Ibrahim Al Abdul Karim, the Governor of Saline Water Conservation Corporation. Rohitesh Dhawan, who's the President and Chief Executive Officer of the International Council on Mining and Metals. Robert Johnston, who's the Executive Director of the Center on Global Energy Policy, please have a seat, at Columbia University. Anthony Morgan is the President of Mining and Metals at Fluor. And last but not least, His Excellency Musaddiq Malik, the Minister for Petroleum and Mineral Resources of Pakistan. To all of you, a very, very warm welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. It's so good to have you. And goodness, you know, the challenge that one can clearly see organizations are facing in trying to deliver is astronomical. It's huge. So, mining company of the future, does it need to have a different structure?
Let me give you, let me thank all the organizers. I'd like to thank His Excellency Bandar Al Kharif and His Excellency Khalid Mdafer for this well-organized event. And just let me give you three things about the mining in the future. Three facts. As per my knowledge, the land mines is winting low or going low. The fresh water is running low worldwide, and the seawater have an abundant resource of mining. So with these three facts, I think by having the science, the re-engineering, and the economy-based structure for the new mining company, we'll be able to find a good resource, abundant resource from the seawater industry. We are working in the desalination industry. I'm presenting SWIC as the largest desalination organization in the world. We are producing 6 million cubic meters a day. At the same time, we are producing a very concentrated liquid, rich of minerals. And by having or figuring out how we can extract the precious and the needed mining from this brine water, we'll be able to secure the demand for the future. Having an abundant resource, having the science again, engineering, and the economy will secure the need of our national growth and will give more support for our ambitious vision related to the renewable energy and having things being totally aligned with the ESG regulation.
Again, there are a number of points that you've made, but I'm going to go around the room and then I'm going to come back to you, Your Excellency, if you don't mind. If I can come to the other Excellency, not this Excellency, that Excellency from Pakistan. It's certainly one thing for us to have a conversation around what specific industries will require in terms of deliverables. So whether we're speaking about water, whether we're speaking about land, your area of expertise is obviously petroleum and minerals. What needs to look different in terms of the mining companies or the mining organizations themselves to deliver the future that we're having to look at? Because currently, the predicted growth is enormous, and I'm not sure that the organizations as they currently exist can necessarily deliver, or am I wrong?
No, I think you're completely right. I think nearly everything will have to change. I think otherwise the industry would not survive. And I would give you two views. I would give you a social view, and then I would give you a technological view. Socially speaking, I think if we want to move this industry forward, we need to see a lot of prosperity. We need to see a lot of prosperity in areas where we mine. We don't mine the areas out. We develop the areas. So we have to take the responsibility for the people living in those areas. The harshness, generally, of the geology has left these areas at the fringes. These are less developed areas with very poor people, mostly not terribly high-skilled. And I think if we are unwilling to take the responsibility for these communities, you would see all of these mines abandoned. You would see a lot of violence as the disparity increases between those who have and those who do not. You will confront violence. People will ultimately come back and snatch what they believe is their right. And therefore, it's critically important, if you want wealth generation, which is what we want, we will all have to jointly assume the responsibility for these communities. So moving forward, if I look at the history of future, I see a lot of prosperity. I have hope. I see a lot of participation of these companies in those communities, whether it be water resources or health resources or educational resources. So that's one thing that I see in the future that absolutely has to happen because it has not happened. If you go to the areas where mining takes place, you will begin to see there's a lot of corporate social responsibility. Don't read me wrong. People are really, the companies are participating in the communities and they're doing a whole lot, but a lot more needs to be done. And companies alone cannot do that. The countries will have to assume the responsibility jointly with these corporations to build those communities up. The second is the technological view. I think we're just not equipped for the future. The future is like Star Trek. I always say this. You know, everything that you saw on Star Trek became a reality. You know, you saw those decks, holodecks they call them, I don't know what they call them, and now you have them on your cell phone. I was just using it.
You were using the hover deck?
No, I was using this holodeck, exactly. I mean, you dial in, you use WhatsApp, you use any number of these things, and you have the picture, you have conferences going on. This is exactly what it was. The only difference is that Star Trek only used holodeck for enemies, and we use them for friends and collaborators, so that's really good. And you know, that little transponder has become this cell phone. Beam me up, Scotty. The only thing that Scotty has not been able to do is beam me up. So what I'm trying to say is that if you look at the technological underpinnings of innovation, you see disruptive changes. You see nanotechnology, which is going to cause miniaturization, and robotics. And that is going to change everything. You're going to see information system that is going to connect you. The connectivity is going to become omnipresent. And with that omnipresent connectivity, it doesn't just pertain to what is above you, it also pertains to what goes deep inside. So you'd be connected inside. You'd have these robotics, you'd have this miniaturization, and you'll have so much data that you would need to depend on cognitive sciences, which is going to express itself in the way of artificial intelligence. So this whole idea of collecting data, analyze data, this is all passé. This is already what I'm talking about is already happening. So it is just a matter of rate of diffusion of innovation into the mining industry, which is going to completely transform it. And in terms of the water resources, water management, waste management, you're going to have gene knockouts. This is also being done. Everything that I'm talking about has already happened or is happening in the labs. You take a little something, some living creature, you do some gene knockouts, you throw it into the water, and it cleans the water. It takes out all impurities. So the biotechnology, the nanotechnology, the information technology, and what I call cognos, or cognitive technology, it's going to completely transform the way we think of mining.
I'm going to stick with the Star Trek, and I just think that is so much fun. I'm going to stick with Star Trek for just one more question. It's life, Rohitesh, but not as we know it. So that's exactly what we're looking at in the future, right? It's going to be life for organizations, for corporations, but it's not going to be as they've known it. It can't be, as His Excellency has just pointed out. What is it that organizations need to be thinking about more specifically? Because yes, we need to staff, we need to skill, we need to explore, we need to do all of those things, but it's still the organization of 10 years ago, 15 years ago. That can't be the case if we're going to have life, but not as we know it.
To me, I think what you're scratching at is what would the mining company of the future need to look like to deliver the future we all agree is required? And here, one of my favorite sayings is that the things that made you successful aren't always the things that will keep you successful. And so it's my firm belief that form follows function. So before we think about what the mining company of the future will look like, perhaps we need to ask ourselves, what function will the mining company of the future be playing, and backward engineer to what it then needs to look like? I think, to me, it has 5 key elements, and I'll be very brief. The first thing a mining company of the future will need to be, and I know this is obvious, but it must be said, is profitable. Without profit, you can't do anything else. And so let's remember that profit's a bit like oxygen. You don't live to breathe, but without breathing, you cannot live. So you need to be profitable. Then the mining of the company of the future will be zero harm. Until we get to a point where everybody who works at a mining company goes home safe every day, the work is not done. Second is the mining company of the future will be net zero. If our story to the world is that we supply essential minerals for decarbonization, we have to decarbonize our own operations completely. The third thing the mining company of the future will be is nature positive. We have to move beyond doing no harm to nature to building nature-positive societies through the mining industry. The fourth thing the mining company of the future will be is diverse and inclusive. You and I talked about this backstage and the importance of that. And the fifth thing the mining company of the future will be is transparent. These 5 things is what society expects us to be. We can deliver none of them if we're not profitable, but profit's a means, not the end.
I think that's a very interesting notion. I think breaking it down in that way requires a specific focus. But I think in order, Rohitesh, for that to happen, and I'm perhaps going to come to you, Robert, in order for that to happen, it has to come from leadership who understands that that has to happen. So how do we inculcate that sense, Robert, within organizations that the change is not necessarily something to be feared, it's not necessarily something hazardous and dangerous to your life. If anything, it may be the thing that's going to ensure your survival.
I think a lot of it has to do with the kind of language that leaders use, as Ro was doing, talking about the future of the industry and other companies. We used to describe this as an extractive industry, right? Taking things out of the community. Now we're talking about what can the industry put back into the community in terms of job creation and social infrastructure and environmentally responsible practices. We used to also talk about commodities, right? That copper's a commodity and nickel's a commodity, but now I think focusing more on, is there a premium for a sustainably sourced and sustainably produced net zero nickel or copper product? And maybe it's not all the same in that commodity category anymore. And we also have to talk about the customer, right? That are we just selling this into a big global commodity market, or are there particular geopolitical trends and technological trends that are going to mean a much closer collaboration between the mining company and the OEM, right? Finding the right kind of lithium for the right kind of battery in the right market. I think that all of those changes are where the leaders need to really take the industry and create a vision that's compelling, as we've heard from everyone today, right? That's compelling to future investors and to future employees, and is something that people are excited to be a part of. Will that still be something called mining, or is it going to be about enabling the energy transition, materials of the future? Probably some of that as well, but I think the language that leaders use will be very important.
That's actually very key. Anthony, one thing that I think we spoke about this earlier in the day, but I think when we're speaking to the profitability question and the sustainability question, it's looking at the supply chain resilience issue. And I think for some industries or for some companies, that not only is critical, but they're not necessarily sure how they're going to navigate ensuring that their own supply chain is resilient, so any shocks that may come, it can absorb those, but that it also allows them to continue to build. Granted, we have to look at cooperation and collaboration globally, not just amongst organizations, but they themselves also surely have to think about that supply chain issue to sustain them and maybe encourage them to look different as they're trying to deal with this new tomorrow. What would your take be on that?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. In the past, companies, I worked for a big engineering construction company, and we used to work very hard on our relationships with primarily our clients because they were the source of our profit. But what we're seeing is we're having to collaborate with far more people in the value chain now. We're having to communicate with the local environment, with the local communities to make sure that they're getting something out of the mines that are being built. We have to communicate very closely with our suppliers of both equipment and bulks. And we need to work closely with the clients continuing and also institutions of learning and other places where we can just make sure that we're trying to do the best thing to make the projects as efficient as possible, make the actual operating facilities as efficient as possible as well, and then rehab, reclaim, and remediate the projects at the end of the day as well. I think it really is going to be vital that we collaborate in a new way. When we talk about the mining company of the future, I know the mining companies are the ones that are taking the risk and building the facilities, but I think we need to think about the ecosystem of the mining industry in more general and holistic terms.
Excellency Al Abdul Karim, if I come back on the water question. There are incredible techniques that are being developed when it comes to water mining specifically. But I think what we're beginning to see is that it's not just a universality in terms of thought, but how some technologies that function in other spaces can be transferred and used in other sectors completely. Can you share with us a little bit about the mining, the water mining technologies, which may be transferable and therefore encouraging a rethink of how some of these other sectors and organizations look and function?
Again, let me give you one more fact. If we think about lithium and how it's limited with certain salt lake distributed in certain countries today, it gives us a limit on our growth in the electrical vehicles. If you can imagine that the seawater have more than 180 billion ton of lithium, the matter is how to extract it. The concentration of this lithium within the ocean, it's 0.2 part per million. If we take the desalination process one step forward, it will manage to reduce the cost of having the lithium from the seawater. So it's all integrated. I mean, having the old school by getting the sun-based technology where it's land intensive and it have a lot of concentrate behind it, lead to introduce more efficient way to extract the lithium, other minerals like magnesium and bromine. Last year, I came here on this stage and I promise that by enhancing the technology of desalination, we will manage to produce minerals, and this is not the new things, by an efficient economical situation. So today we sign a JDE with a Saudi company to extract bromine from the desalination industry. We have a magnesium hydroxide. It's already extracted in Shuaibah. We do our research. We do hundreds of research, but it's worth if one of those research and innovation success to reduce the cost of getting minerals from the seawater, and we managed to bring at least 3 minerals today with a viable economy based, and we are looking for investors. We sign with a Saudi company, and we will sign with another Chinese company, and we will open the door widely to get the benefit from the concentration that we produce it as a brine from our industry. We managed to increase the concentration from 80,000 ppm to 200,000 ppm. This is a good number to find things being more logical in terms of economical side. This is my point of view, and I think we are doing our best in the water industry to integrate with different science, like the bioleaching process. It's part of our focus today, how we can utilize the biology science to extract more minerals from our industry.
Your Excellency, Malik, that diversity and that sort of crossover is just as important. You spoke earlier about how we have to think differently about how we engage with communities, right? It can't be that we're extracting, it's about how do we build the organization, and how do we build the community at the same time. That sharing of technology and that sharing of expertise and skill, if you will, surely that's going to become quite critical when we're looking at organizations of the future. Now, historically, there's this sector, there's this sector, there's this sector, but I think you're seeing not just in the makeup of businesses themselves, of who's sitting around the boardroom, that diversity and thinking differently and other points of view are important. Surely that's going to become just as important when it comes to businesses and organizations themselves, almost that cross-pollination.
I think you asked this question earlier as well, about the structure of the organization. And I think the organizations of the future, the minerals, mining organizations of the future, have to be boundaryless. I think right now they are structured in a very discrete manner. And those discrete manners create silos of technology, silos of geography, silos. And whereas what you need are platforms. So in order for anyone to create these cross-cutting platforms across so many technologies, so many marketplaces, so many needs, one will be challenged to create a boundaryless organization. It would be much like biotechnology. It would be impossible for one organization to harness all of these capabilities and all of these sciences together. So they will have to learn the art of going into the labs and going into the universities and figuring out where the miniaturization is taking place, where all of these things are happening, and pull them in and consolidate them into something that is magnificent, something that is new, and something which is beneficial. And my hope is beneficial not just in the way of money-making, profitability, which is essential, but also beneficial in the way of communities. I think two trends are very clear. One is miniaturization, and the other is convergence of technologies. Moving forward, I don't see any one company, mining company, succeeding because they have control or they have mastery over one technology. So the convergence is going to be very important. I think the demand function is going to change. With 3D printing, what we are saying, oh, I'm a miner, well, it won't matter, because once the material is there, I could 3D print it right there and then. So this whole idea of centralization, that I'm a miner, then I'm basically a smelter, and then the demand function doesn't care. I need it here, and I can take that material and I can 3D print it here. And if I can 3D print it here, then this entire idea of holding back on value chains and going downstream and not meeting the needs of the people is going to become passé. And those companies, I believe, which are going to try to consolidate and continue to define themselves as I am this, are going to become that. And if they resist that, I think they would face.
That's quite intriguing, Rohitesh, what he's saying. You sit in a space where you engage with a lot of these organizations. How easy is it going to be to do all of this when you look at how those organizations are currently structured and some of the thinking process that is inculcated? Because ultimately, they're still having to do business every day, right?
Correct. The image that comes to mind is building the aeroplane while we fly it. There is no time to pause and create this magical new mining company of the future, and then say, now we get to go, because the scale of transformation is happening at the same time as growth, and we have to be able to do both. A short story to me to explain what change we're going to have to see in the future. As many of you will know, there is often tension between mining companies and indigenous peoples who have stewardship over land. Many cases it's worked very well, some cases it's worked poorly. When we talk to indigenous groups, often the answer about what would a positive community-focused mining environment look like is, can you mine slower for longer? Now that really shocks the system, because traditionally how we've thought about mining is a 20, 30, 40-year life of mine based on how economical and technologically feasible it was to mine the ore body. If the community is saying to us, we would like you to mine slower but longer, it's going to have to force us to think differently how we plan to mine and how we execute the mine plan.
Appetite for that?
Theoretically high. When you get to seeing what that would actually involve, very scary, admittedly, but we have no choice, because as Mr. Malik is telling us, if we don't do it, there is no future where we have the community support anyway.
Imagine not doing it.
Pardon?
I said imagine not doing it.
Oh, absolutely. But that is the question, right, Robert? Imagine not doing it. So we can theorize, and I can ask Roy Tesh and give him a hard time and say, oh, this isn't doable, that's not doable, it's too quick, they're going to... But the reality is that what's going to happen if we don't? So we kind of have to. I'd like for you actually to address a little bit this sense of being in the corporate space, and as a leader, you may have the appetite, but you have to take a whole team along with you. And that's not necessarily so easy to do either.
Yeah, I think the partnership concept is an important one. And what does a partnership really look like? How do you achieve it? I think it comes down to convincing the team that you can have half of something or 100% of nothing. Because a lot of these projects are just not going to get built without partnerships. And increasingly those partnerships are going to be less about job creation and maybe sort of modest tax and royalty contributions, although that will remain part of it. And they will be increasingly based around equity.
Yeah.
So it's reimagining, not an indigenous community or even a local community as a stakeholder to be managed, but as a partner to be embraced in the entire journey of the asset, where you're sharing the upside, but also the downside. And that's where on the indigenous side, it takes a bit of a shift in thinking sometimes to saying, well, I'm taking the risk as well. So I think this partnership evolution around true deep equity-based partnerships will create a lot more space and opportunities for new projects to come online. Not every community will want it, but I think that many under those terms, combined with the kind of free, prior, informed consent around the environmental side, could be a recipe for success.
Can you believe we've got like 2 minutes left? So this is going to be really quick. I'm going to put you on the spot ever so slightly. You each have organizations that you need to go back to and you need to effect change, whether it's at a government level, whether it's at a multinational organization or a corporate. 2 things that you're going to go back and do in order to ensure that your organization is going to be a company that exists in the future. I know that's a big one, but you're smart, so you can do it. If I can maybe start with you, Anthony, and I'm going to work my way this way. So the people on this end get time to think, you don't.
Given that we've got a minute and a half, I'll be pretty brief. Look, I think there's two main things that we need to focus on in the corporate world. One is we need to better use technology and innovate and make our industry more attractive to the next generation. Mines have been built fairly well over the last 200-300 years, however long we've been building mines. We need a new generation to come in and use different thoughts and different processes with a different culture to build the mines of the future. So we need to make the mining industry more attractive for the people we need to bring into the mining industry. So I think innovate more and make it more attractive to the next generation that can build better mines in the future for the communities they serve.
Robert, your 2. Homework.
Well, I'm in the education world now at Columbia University, and I think we'll try to continue to build capacity and understanding of finance and the technological side of mining, the business side of it, for the communities that want to engage on a level playing field with the industry, which obviously has a number of advantages. And we'll also try to educate governments about what kind of policies will make for the most effective, long-term, sustainable mining projects that leverage the kind of innovation that we're talking about.
Yeah, that's it. Rohitesh, I know you're not necessarily, but yeah, okay, you got it.
Greater diversity around every decision-making table and learning to share power with others.
They're trying to yell at me in my ear, and I don't know if I'm
he's
going
a
Can I at least give the excellencies an opportunity to give me their 2 points? Thank you. They agree. Okay, great. Excellency, your 2 points.
Well, I would say rethink completely. Rethink doesn't mean incrementally. Rethink means go back and rethink the fundamentals. I think scale, which is what the companies are all geared towards, is going to be passé. I think it's going to be value. I think there's going to be zero waste because of nanotechnology and atoms being built up into materials. If you don't think that, you'll never get there.
I'm
So
going to push you.
rethink completely.
That was 1, and what was 2? Your second homework.
I mean, one is change
Okay.
scale to value,
Okay, and then the
the
second
second
one
is
is
rethink everything, the business model, the structure, the process, the governance framework, everything, and the resource allocation. If you're going to foster innovation, you'll have to create, as I said earlier, a boundaryless organization.
Excellency, the last word is yours. Your 2 things, homework.
Innovation, contribute more and more and more in our responsibility for the global humanity.
And with that, we've come to the end of our discussion. To all of you, thank you ever so much. We're hopelessly over time, but that's all good. Thank you. A round of applause for our panelists. Thank you so very much.